Adventures of the Wishing Chair by Enid Blyton. The Strange Old Shop. The adventures really began on the day that Mollie and Peter went out to buy a present for their mother's birthday. They emptied the money out of their money box and counted it.
Now what shall we buy, Mother?
Said Mollie.
Mother likes old things. If we could find an old shop somewhere, full of old things, she would love an old tea caddy, I'm sure, or an old vase.
All right, we'll go and find one of those shops. Come on, Mollie.
Off they went and ran into the town. The children left the main street and went down a little turning. There were more shops there, but still not the one they wanted. So on they went and came to a small, narrow street whose houses were so close that there was hardly any light in the road. And there, tucked away in the middle, was the shop with Antiques printed on a label inside the dirty window.
Good,
said Peter.
Here is a shop that sells old things. Mollie, do you see that strange little vase with swans set all round it? I'm sure Mother would like that. We could buy some flowers to put in it.
So into the old dark shop they went. It was so dark that the children stumbled over some piled-up rugs on the floor. Nobody seemed to be about. Peter went to the counter and rapped on it. A tiny door at the back opened, and out came the strangest little man, no higher than the counter top. He had pointed ears like a pixie. The children stared at him in surprise. He looked very cross and miserable.
We want to buy the vase with swans round it,
said Peter. Muttering and grumbling to himself, the little chap picked up the vase and pushed it across the counter. Peter put down the money.
Can I have some paper to wrap the vase in, please? You see, it's for my mother's birthday, and I don't want her to see me carrying it home.
Grumbling away to himself, the little man went to a pile of boxes at the back of the shop and began to open one to look for a piece of paper. The children watched. To their enormous surprise, a large black cat with golden eyes jumped out of the box and began to spit and snarl at the little man. He smacked it and put it back again. He opened another box. Out of that came a great wreath of green smoke that wound about the shop and smelt strange. The little man caught hold of it as if it were a ribbon and tried to stuff it back into the box again, but it broke off and went wandering away. How he stamped and raged. The children felt quite frightened.
We'd better go without the paper,
whispered Mollie to Peter. But just then, another extraordinary thing happened. Out of the next box came a crowd of blue butterflies. They flew into the air, and the little man shouted with rage again. He darted to the door and shut it, afraid that the butterflies would escape. To the children's horror, they saw him lock the door too, and put the key into his pocket. Mollie was frightened.
We can't get out till he lets us go. Oh dear, why did we ever come here? I'm sure that little man is a gnome or something.
The little fellow opened another box and, hey presto, out jumped a red fox. It gave a short bark and began to run about the shop, its nose to the ground. The children were half afraid of being bitten, and they both sat in an old chair together, their legs drawn up off the ground out of the way of the fox. It was the most curious shop they'd ever been in. Why were they keeping all those peculiar things in boxes? Really, there must be magic about somewhere. It couldn't be a proper shop. The children noticed a little stairway leading off the shop about the middle, and suddenly at the top of this, there appeared somebody else. It was somebody tall and thin, with such a long beard that it swept the ground. On his head was a pointed hat that made him seem taller still. Mollie whispered,
Look, Peter, doesn't he look like a wizard?
Keep it, what you doing down there?
cried the newcomer in a strange, deep voice like the rumbling of faraway thunder.
Enchant, how dare you open those boxes? You've let out the butterflies and the foxes and the black cat.
He stamped down the stairs and then saw the children. He stared at them.
Who are you?
We wanted to buy this vase,
said Peter, frightened. The tall man twisted his beard into a knot, tied it under his chin, and said,
Well, seeing you are here, you can help Tibbet to catch the fox. Come on, come on.
I don't want to,
said Molly.
He might bite me. Unlock the door and let us go out.
Not till the fox and all the butterflies are caught and put in their boxes again,
said the tall man.
Oh dear,
said Peter, making no movement to get out of the chair in which he and Molly were still sitting with their legs drawn up. And then the most extraordinary thing of all happened. The chair they were sitting in began to creak and groan, and suddenly it rose up into the air with the two children in it. They held tight, wondering what was happening. It flew to the door, but that was shut. It flew to the window, but that was shut too. Meanwhile, the wizard and Tippet were running after it, crying in rage.
How dare you use our wishing chair? Wish it back! Wish it back!
But Peter cried out,
I shan't! Go on, wishing chair, take us home!
The chair, finding that it could not get out of the door or the window, flew up the little stairway. It flew to the window there, which was open, and immediately rose very high indeed, far above the housetops, and flew towards the children's home. How surprised they were, and how tightly they clung to the arms. It would be terrible to fall. Peter said,
I say, Molly, can you hear a flapping noise? Has the chair got wings anywhere?
Molly peeped cautiously over the edge of the chair and said,
Yes, it has a little red wing growing out the side of each leg, and they make the flapping noise. How peculiar!
The chair began to fly downwards. The children saw that they were just over the garden.
Go to our playroom, chair,
said Peter quickly. The chair went to a big shed at the bottom of the garden. Inside was a playroom for the children, and here they kept all their toys and books and could play any game they liked. The chair flew in at the open door and came to rest on the floor. The children jumped off and looked at one another.
The first real adventure we've ever had in our lives,
said Molly in delight.
Oh, Peter, to think we've got a magic chair, a wishing chair.
Well, it isn't really ours. Perhaps we had better send it back to the shop.
Molly sounded very sad.
I suppose we had. It would be so lovely if we could keep it, though.
Go back to your shop, chair,
commanded Peter. The chair didn't move an inch. Peter repeated the command.
Go back to your shop, chair.
Still the chair wouldn't move. And suddenly the children noticed that its little red wings had gone from the legs. It looked just an ordinary chair now. Peter cried out in surprise.
Look, Molly, the chair hasn't any wings. It can't fly. I expect it is only when it grows wings that it can fly. It must just have grown them when we were sitting in it in the shop. What luck for us!
Peter, let's wait till the chair has grown wings again. Then get in it and see where it goes.
Peter was doubtful.
Well, it might take us anywhere. Still, we've always wanted adventures, Molly, haven't we? So we'll try. The very next time our wishing chair grows wings, we'll sit in it and fly off again.
Molly was delighted and said,
I hope it will be tomorrow.
The Giant's Castle. Each day, Molly and Peter ran down to their playroom in the garden and looked at their wishing chair to see if it had grown wings again. But each time they were disappointed. It hadn't. Peter said,
It may grow them in the night, but we can't possibly keep coming here in the dark to see. We must just be patient.
Sometimes the children sat in the chair and wished themselves away, but nothing happened at all. It was really very disappointing. And then one day the chair grew wings again. They couldn't help seeing this because the chair was flapping its wings about as if it was going to fly off. Peter dragged Molly to the chair.
Quick, quick, jump in! It's going to fly!
They were just in time. The chair rose up in the air, flapping its wings strongly and made for the door. Out it went and rose high into the air at once. The children clung on tightly in the greatest delight.
Where do you suppose it's going, Molly?
Goodness knows. Let it take us wherever it wants to. It will be exciting anyhow.
By and by, a high mountain rose up below, and the children looked down at it in amazement. On the top was an enormous castle.
Where's this, I wonder?
Said Peter.
Oh, look, Molly. The chair is going down to the castle.
Down, flapping its rose-red wings. Soon it came to the castle roof and settled down there with a sigh, as if it was quite tired out. Peter excitedly jumped off the chair and ran to a flight of enormous steps that led down to the inside of the castle. He peeped down. No one was about.
Come on, Molly,
he called.
Let's explore. It's the biggest castle I've ever seen. I wonder who lives here. Let's go and see.
They went down the steps and came to a big staircase. On every side were massive doors, bolted on the outside. Molly was a bit scared.
I hope there are no prisoners inside.
The stairs suddenly ended in a great hall. The children stood and looked in astonishment. Sitting at an enormous table was a giant as big as 6 men. His eyes were on a book, and he was trying to add up figures.
3 times 7, 3 times 7, 3 times 7. Oh, I never can remember. Where's that miserable little pixie? If he doesn't know, I'll turn him into a black beetle.
The giant lifted up his head and shouted so loudly that both children put their hands over their ears.
Chinky! Chinky!
A pixie, not quite so big as the children, came running out of what looked like a scullery. The giant growled.
To me, I can't do my sums again. I'm adding up all I spent last week, and it won't come right. What are 3 times 7?
I don't know,
stammered the poor pixie.
Then I'll lock you into the top room of the castle till you do now.
And the giant, in a rage, picked up the pixie and went to the stairs. Then he saw the children standing there, and he stopped in astonishment.
Who are you, and what are you doing here?
We've just come on a flying visit,
said Peter boldly.
We know what 3 times 7 are, and 7 times 3 too. So if you let that pixie go, we'll tell you.
The giant was delighted.
Oh, you tell me then, you clever children.
There are 21,
said Peter. The giant, still holding the pixie tightly in his hand, went across to the table and added up some figures.
Yes, 21. Now, why did I think of that? Good.
Let the pixie go,
begged Molly. The giant gave a wicked grin.
Oh, no. He shall be shut up in the top room of my castle, and you shall be my servant instead, and help me to add up my sums. Come along with me while I shut up Chinky.
He pushed the 2 angry children in front of him and made them go all the way up the stairs until they came to the topmost door. The giant unbolted it and pushed the weeping pixie inside. Then he bolted it again and locked it. Peter whispered to Molly,
Quick, let's race up these steps to the roof and get on our magic chair.
So, whilst the giant was locking the door, the 2 of them shot up the steps to the roof. The giant didn't try to stop them. He stood and roared with laughter and shouted,
Well, I don't know how you expect to escape that way. You'll have to come down the steps again, and I shall be waiting here to catch you. Then what a spanking you'll get.
The children climbed out onto the flat piece of castle roof. There was the chair, standing just where they'd left it, its red wings gleaming in the sun. They threw themselves into it, and Peter cried,
Go to the room where that little pixie Chinky is.
The chair rose into the air, flew over the castle roof and then down to a big window. It was open, and the chair squeezed itself inside. Chinky the pixie was there, sitting on the floor, weeping. When he saw the chair coming in with the two children sitting in it, he was so astonished that he couldn't even get up off the floor. Molly called to him,
Quick, come into this chair, Chinky. We'll help you to escape.
Who's talking in there?
Boomed the giant's enormous voice, and the children heard the bolts being undone and the key turned to unlock the door.
Quick, quick, Chinky!
Shouted Peter, and he dragged the amazed pixie to the magic chair. They all three sat in it, huddled together, and Peter shouted,
Take us home!
The door flew open, and the giant rushed in just as the chair sailed out of the window. He ran to the window and made a grab at the chair. His big hand knocked against a leg, and the chair shook violently. Chinky nearly fell off, but Peter grabbed him and pulled him back safely. Then they sailed up into the air, far out of the reach of the angry giant. Peter shouted,
We've escaped! What an adventure! Cheer up, Chinky. We'll take you home with us if you like. We have a fine playroom at the end of our garden. You can live there and no one will know. We will have a lot of fun with you in the wishing chair.
Chinky smiled gratefully.
You are very kind to me. I shall love to live with you. I can take you on many, many adventures.
Soon they were safely in the garden, and the chair flew in at the open door to the playroom. Its wings disappeared, and it settled itself down with a long sigh. Molly said to the pixie,
You can make a nice bed out of cushions from the sofa, and I'll give you a rug to cover yourself with. But we must go now because it's past our tea time. We'll come and see you again tomorrow. Good luck.
The Ho-Ho Wizard. One day, when Molly and Peter went to see Chinky, they found him reading a letter and looking very miserable. Molly went over to him.
What's the matter, Chinky?
Then Chinky told them his problem.
I've just had a letter from my cousin Gobo. He says that my village is very unhappy because a wizard has come to live there called Ho-Ho. He is a horrid man and walks about saying ho-ho all the time, catching the little pixies to help him in his magic and putting all kinds of spells on anyone that goes against him. I feel very unhappy. Oh, Chinky, we're ever so sorry. Can we help in any way?
Asked Molly. But Chinky looked even more sad.
I don't think so, but I would very much like to go off in the wishing chair to my village the next time it grows wings, if you don't mind. Of course.
Exclaimed Molly. And then she pointed to the magic chair.
Look! Oh, look, it has grown wings now. How lovely. It must have heard what we said.
We'll all go,
said Peter, excited to think that another adventure had begun. He and Molly went to the chair and sat firmly down in it. Chinky squeezed in between them.
You are such nice children.
The chair creaked, and before it could fly off, the pixie cried out loudly,
Go to the village of Apple Pie.
It flew slowly out of the door, flapping its rose-red wings. The children were really excited now. The village of Apple Pie. How magic it sounded. It didn't take them very long to get there. The chair put them down in the middle of the village street and was at once surrounded by an excited crowd of pixies who shook hands with Chinky and asked him 100 questions. He talked at the top of his voice, explained who the children were and why he'd come. Then he turned pale. The Ho-Ho Wizard was coming down the street. He was a little fellow with a long flowing cloak that swirled out as he walked and showed its bright golden lining. On his head he wore a round tight cap set with silver bells that tinkled loudly. He wore 3 pairs of glasses on his long nose and a beard that hung in 3 pieces down to his waist. He really was a strange-looking fellow.
Ho, ho!
He said as he came near the pixies.
What have we here? Visitors? And bless us all, this is a wishing chair, as sure as dogs have tails. Ho, 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 so you have a magic chair. Pray, come and have a cup of cocoa with me this morning, and I will buy your chair from you.
But we don't want to sell it,
began Peter at once. The wizard turned round on him, and from his eyes there came what looked like real sparks. He was very angry.
How dare you refuse me anything? I will turn you into a...
We will come in half an hour.
Stammered Chinky, pushing Peter behind him.
This boy did not understand how important you are, Sir Wizard.
Brrr.
Growled the wizard and stalked off, his cloak flying out behind him.
Now what are we to do?
Asked Peter in dismay.
Can't we get into the chair and fly off, Chinky?
All the pixies cried out at once.
No!
If you do, Ho-Ho will punish the whole village, and that would be terrible. Stay here and help us.
Come to my cousin Gobo's cottage and let us think.
Said Chinky. So the two children went with him and Gobo, who was really very like Chinky, to a little crooked cottage at the end of the village. It was beautifully clean and neat, and the children sat down to eat coconut cakes and drink lemonade. Everyone was rather quiet. Then Peter's eyes began to twinkle, and he leaned over to Gobo.
I say, Gobo, have you by any chance got a spell to put people to sleep?
He asked.
Of course.
Replied Gobo, puzzled.
Why?
Peter smiled.
Well, I have a fine plan. What about putting old Ho-Ho to sleep?
What's the use of that?
Said Chinky and Gobo.
Well, when he's asleep, we'll pop him into the magic chair, take him off somewhere and leave him, and then go back home ourselves,
Said Peter.
That would get rid of him for you, wouldn't it?
Chinky jumped up from his seat in excitement.
My goodness, that's an idea, Gobo. If only we could do it. Listen, where's the sleepy spell?
Here?
Said Gobo, opening a drawer and taking out a tiny yellow thing like a mustard seed.
Well, Peter has a bag of chocolates, and he could put the sleepy spell into one of them and give it to Ho-Ho. Peter must carry it very carefully. Ho-Ho is sure to ask what it is, and if Peter says it is a very special chocolate, or something like that, the old wizard is sure to be greedy enough to take it from him and eat it. Then he will fall asleep, and we'll take him off to the chair to the old Dame Tap-Tap, who will be so pleased to have him. He once tried to change her into a ladybird, so I don't think she will let him go in a hurry.
They chose a chocolate with a violet on top because it looked so delicious. Peter made a little hole in it and popped in the sleepy spell. Then he left the rest of the chocolates with Gobo, put the violet one into the bag, and went off to get the wishing chair with the others. It was still standing in the marketplace, its red wings hanging down, for it was tired. Chinky and Peter thought they might as well carry it to Ho-Ho's cottage, which was only in the next street, so off they went, taking it on their shoulders. Ho-Ho was waiting for them, his wily face watching from a window. He opened the door, and they all went in with the chair. He spoke to them.
I see you brought me the chair. Very sensible of you. Now, sit down and have a cup of cocoa.
He poured out some very thin cocoa made without any milk and looked at them all sharply. He saw at once that Peter was holding something very carefully in his hand, which he did not even put down when he was drinking his cocoa. He went over to Peter.
What have you got in your hand?
Something I want to keep.
Replied Peter at once.
Show me. Show me.
No,
Said Peter. The wizard was really angry now.
Show me! Show me!
Peter pretended to be frightened and at once put the paper bag on the table. The wizard took it and opened it. He took out the chocolate.
Ho, ho! The finest chocolate I ever saw.
He said, and licked it to see what it tasted like.
don't eat it. Oh, don't eat it.
Cried Peter at once, pretending to be most upset.
It's mine.
Well, now it's mine.
Said the wizard, and he popped it into his mouth and chewed it up. And no sooner had he swallowed it than his head began to nod. His eyes closed, and he snored like 20 pigs grunting.
The spell has worked. The spell has worked.
Cried Peter, jumping about in excitement, but Chinky stopped him.
Peter, this is no time to jump and yell. The spell may stop at any time. and we don't want to wake up the wizard till we've got him to Dame Tap-Tap's. Help me to put him into the chair.
Between them, they dumped the sleeping wizard into the chair. Then Molly sat on one arm, Peter sat on the other, and Chinky sat right on the top of the back.
To Dame Tap-Tap,
he cried. At once the wishing chair flapped its idle wings, flew out of the door and up into the air, cheered by all the pixies in the village. What a thrill that was! In about 5 minutes the chair flew downwards again to a small cottage set right on the top of a windy hill. It was Dame Tap-Tap's home. The chair flew down to her front door, outside which there was a wooden bench. The three of them pulled the snoring wizard out of the chair and put him on the bench. Then Chinky took hold of the knocker and banged it hard 4 times. He yelled at the top of his voice,
Dame Tap-Tap, here's a present for you.
Then he and the children bundled into the wishing chair again, and off they flew into the air, leaning over to see the delight of the old dame when she opened her door and found the wizard Ho-Ho sleeping outside. Chinky chuckled.
What a shock for him when he wakes up, and thank you very much, children, for your help. You've saved Apple Pie Village from a very nasty man. It will be nice to think of him cleaning Dame Tap-Tap's kitchen and getting water for her from the well. I guess she'll make him work hard. Ho-ho!
Roared the children as the chair flew down to their playroom, and Peter added,
Perhaps the wizard won't say ho-ho quite so much to Dame Tap-Tap.
Chinky grinned.
No, he might get into trouble if he did. Well, here we are home again. See you tomorrow, children.
Poor lost Chinky. The next time the children went up in the wishing chair, a dreadful thing happened. As they were flying, they heard a loud droning noise and looked around.
It's an aeroplane,
shouted Peter.
Look out, it's very near us,
cried Molly. So it was. It didn't seem to see them. It flew straight at them, and the edge of one wing touched the flying chair, giving a tremendous jerk. Molly and Peter were sitting tightly in the seat, but Chinky was on the back, and he was jolted right off the chair. The 2 children watched in the greatest dismay as he fell down and down and down. Molly cried out desperately,
Oh, Peter, poor Chinky. Whatever will happen to him?
The aeroplane flew away, and Peter turned pale and looked at Molly.
We must make the chair go down and see if Chinky is hurt. What a terrible thing to happen. Chair, fly down to earth.
The chair flapped its wings and flew slowly to the ground. It stood there and the children jumped off. They were in open country with wide fields all around, but there was no sign of Chinky at all. They heard the sound of someone singing a song and saw, coming towards them, a round, fat little man carrying a bundle on his head. Peter called to him.
Excuse me, have you seen a little pixie falling out of the sky?
All that fell out of the sky was a large snowflake,
replied the little man, who went on his way, his bundle bobbing on his head.
Have you seen a pixie falling out of the sky?
No, have you? Replied the round little woman, grinning.
Of course,
said Molly impatiently. The round woman sniffed. Fibber, a big snowflake fell out of the sky and nothing else.
They've got snowflakes on the brain,
said Peter as the woman went on her way.
Come on, Molly. We'd better go and look for Chinky ourselves. I don't trust these stupid people.
They carried the chair along with them and came to a marketplace. It was full of fat round people, and a town crier was going round ringing a bell and crying,
Oh, yay! Oh, yay!
Then Peter had a wonderful idea.
I say, Molly, let's tell the town crier to shout out about Chinky. We'll offer a reward to anyone who can tell us about him. Someone must have seen him fall.
So before very long, The town crier was ringing his bell and crying loudly,
Oh, yay! Oh, yay! His reward is offered to anyone having news of a pixie who fell from the sky. Oh, yay! Oh, yay!
Mollie and Peter stood on a platform so they could be easily seen, and to their delight, quite a crowd of people came to them.
We've news! We've news!
They cried, trying to get to Peter first.
Where did you see the pixie fall?
Peter asked the first man.
Sir, I saw a big snowflake fall in the buttercup field.
Peter was cross with him.
Don't be foolish. I said a pixie, not a snowflake. Don't you know the difference between pixies and snowflakes? We all know snowflakes fall out of the sky. That's not news. Next, please.
But the next person said the same thing, and the next, and the next. Then suddenly someone shouted, "We want our reward!"
You haven't given us the right news.
Peter shouted back angrily.
That doesn't matter!
The crowd was angry now and looked rather funny too, because for some reason or other they all carried their bundles and baskets balanced on their heads.
Give us our reward!
They swarmed towards Mollie and Peter, who suddenly felt frightened. Peter said,
I don't like this, Mollie. Let's go. These stupid people think that pixies and snowflakes are the same. We can't give them all a reward. Climb into the chair.
Mollie jumped into the chair, which was just near them on the platform, and Peter sat on the arm and cried,
Home chair, quickly!
The chair flapped its wings and rose up just above the heads of the angry people. Its legs began to jerk in and out, and to the children's astonishment kicked off the bundles, pots and baskets from the heads of the furious crowd below. It was most comical to see the chair playing such a trick, but Mollie was in tears.
What's the matter?
Asked Peter, giving her his handkerchief. Mollie sobbed.
It's Chinky. I did love him so. Now I feel as if I never shall see him again.
Peter's eyes filled with tears too.
Yes, he was such a good friend. It would be terrible if we never saw him again.
They flew home in silence. The chair flew in at the playroom door and the children jumped off. Mollie spoke first.
It will never be so nice going on adventures again. Why ever not?
Said a happy little voice. And there was Chinky the pixie, sitting on the floor reading a book. The children were full of joy, and Mollie ran across to him, hugging him hard.
Oh, Chinky, we thought you were lost forever when you fell from the chair. Don't break me in half.
Laughed Chinky.
I wasn't hurt at all. I just changed myself into a big snowflake and then fell into the buttercup field. Then I caught the next bus back here. I've been waiting ages for you.
Then Peter laughed.
Snowflake! So that's why everyone talked about snowflakes. Now I understand.
Then they told Chinky all about their adventures, and how the pixie laughed when he heard about the chair kicking the bundles off the heads of the angry people. Then Chinky said,
I wish I'd been there. Come on now, what about a game of Snap?
When the music stops, turn your cassette over. The Lost Cat. One morning it was very wet, and Mollie, Peter and Chinky were playing a very noisy game of Snap in the playroom. Whiskers, the black cat, had come with them, and had curled herself up on a cushion in the wishing chair, where she'd gone fast asleep. The children were so interested in the game that they didn't hear a little flapping sound. The wishing chair had grown its wings and was flapping them gently to and fro. Before anyone noticed, the chair rose silently into the air and flew out of the open door, taking the puss-cat with it, still fast asleep. Peter looked round the playroom to see what game to play next, and then he sounded rather surprised and scared.
Where's the chair gone?
Chinky and Mollie looked round too. Mollie went pale.
It's gone. It was here when we began our game,
said Chinky.
It must have slipped out without us noticing. I sort of remember feeling a little draught. It must have been its wings flapping.
Molly was alarmed.
Oh dear, Whiskers has gone. She was asleep on the cushion. Oh, Chinky, will she come back?
Chinky looked worried.
Depends where she has gone to.
Molly began to cry. She was very fond of Whiskers.
Oh, why did we let Whiskers go to sleep on the chair?
Chinky patted Molly on the shoulder.
Well, it's no good crying. We must just wait and see. Perhaps old Whiskers will come back still fast asleep when the chair returns.
They waited for an hour or two, and then Peter gave a shout and pointed up into the sky. There was the chair, flapping its way back, all its red wings twinkling up and down.
Look, there's the chair. Oh, I do hope Whiskers is on her cushion. Suppose she has fallen out.
The chair flapped its way downwards and flew in at the open door. It came to rest in its usual place and gave a sigh and a creak. The children rushed to it. There was no cat there. The cushion was still in its place, with a dent in the middle where Whiskers had lain, but that was all. The three stared at one another in dismay.
Whiskers has been caught by a witch. There's no doubt about it. Look at this,
said Chinky, picking up a tiny silver star that lay on the seat of the chair.
This little star has fallen off a witch's embroidered cloak.
Molly was sad.
Oh, poor Whiskers. I do want her back. Oh, Chinky, what shall we do?
Well, we'd better find out first where she has gone,
said Chinky.
Then the next time the chair grows its wings, we'll go and rescue her.
How can we find out where she's gone?
Asked Molly, drying her eyes.
I'll have to work a spell to find that out. I'll have to get a few pixies in to help me. Go and sit down on the couch, Mollie and Peter, and don't speak a word until I've finished. The pixies won't help me if you interfere. They are very shy just about here.
Mollie and Peter did as they were told. Chinky went to the open door and clapped his hands softly 3 times, then whistled like a blackbird, and called a magic word that sounded like Luma, 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 Loo. In a minute or two, 4 little pixies, a bit smaller than Chinky, came running in at the door. They stopped when they saw the 2 children, but Chinky said,
Don't worry, they are friends of mine. They won't interfere. I want to do a spell to find out where this wishing chair has just been to. Will you help me?
The pixies nodded their heads. Chinky sat down in the wishing chair, holding in his hands a mirror. The 4 little pixies joined hands and danced round the chair, first one way and then the other, chanting a magic song that got higher and higher and quicker. Suddenly, the 4 dancing pixies stopped the singing and fell to the floor, panting, calling,
Now look and tell what you see, Chinky.
Chinky stared into the mirror and then gave a shout.
I see her. It's the witch Kiri Kiri. She has got Whiskers. Here she is, cooking dinner for her.
The 2 children sprang up from the couch and hurried to look into the mirror that Chinky held. To their great amazement, instead of seeing their own faces, they saw a picture of Whiskers, their cat, stirring a soup pot on a big stove. And behind her was an old witch, clad in a long black cloak embroidered with silver stars and moons. Chinky pointed.
See her? That's the witch Kiri Kiri. I know where she lives. We'll go and rescue Whiskers this very night.
The 4 little pixies twittered,
Goodbye, goodbye,
and ran out. The picture in the mirror faded away. The children and Chinky looked at one another. Then Molly said,
What a marvellous spell. Shall we really go and fetch Whiskers tonight?
Chinky nodded.
Yes, come here at midnight, ready dressed. If the chair has grown its wings, we'll go in it. If not, we'll take the underground train to the witch's house.
What an adventure.
Cried Molly. The witch Kiri Kiri. Molly had a little alarm clock and she set it for 11:45, so they awoke in good time for their adventure. Chinky was waiting for them and told them,
We can't go in the wishing chair. It hasn't grown its wings again. I think it's asleep because it gave a tiny snore just now. Come on, there's no time to lose if we want to catch the underground train.
He led the children to a big tree at the bottom of the garden. He twisted a piece of the bark, and a door slid open. There was a narrow staircase in the tree going downwards. Mollie and Peter were so surprised to see it.
Go down the stairs,
Chinky said to them.
I'll just shut the door behind us.
They climbed down and came to a small passage and went along it until they came to a big turnstile. There was a little platform beyond with a railway line running by it. Almost at once a train appeared out of the darkness. Its lamps gleamed like two eyes. There were no carriages, just open trucks with cushions in. The train was very crowded, and the children and Chinky found it difficult to get seats. Gnomes, brownies, rabbits, moles, elves, and hedgehogs sat in the trucks, chattering and laughing. The train set off with much clattering. It stopped at station after station, and at last came to one labelled Kiri Kiri Station. Chinky and the children got out. Chinky explained,
Kiri Kiri is such a rich and powerful witch that she has a station of her own. Now listen, this is my plan, children. It's no use trying to get her by magic, because the witch's magic is much stronger than mine. We must get her by a trick.
What trick?
asked the children. Chinky said quietly,
We'll creep into her little garden and we'll make scrapey noises on the wall, like mice. We'll squeak like mice too, and the witch will hear us and send whiskers out to catch the mice. Then we'll get her, run back to the station and catch the next train home.
Peter was very impressed.
What a fine plan. It's so simple too. It can't go wrong.
Then Chinky pointed to a large house in the distance.
That's Kiri Kiri's house.
They slipped inside the witch's wicket gate,
You go to that end of the house and I'll go to the other.
whispered Chinky. So Peter and Mollie crept to one end and began to scratch against the wall with bits of stick, while Chinky did the same the other end. Then they squeaked as high as they could, exactly like mice. They heard a window being thrown up and saw the witch's head outlined against the lamplight. She was grumbling, "My cabin! Hi, Whiskers! Come here! Catch them! Catch them!" Whiskers jumped down into the garden. The witch slammed down the window and drew the blind. Mollie made a dash for the big black cat and lifted her into her arms. Whiskers purred and rubbed her soft head against Mollie's hand. Chinky and Peter came up in delight.
The plan worked beautifully. Come on, let's go to the station.
And then the most unfortunate thing happened. Peter fell over a bush and came down with a loud clatter on the path.
Ah!
At once the window flew up again and Kiri Kiri looked out. She shouted a very magic word and slammed the window down again.
Oh dear, oh dear, oh dear,
Groaned Chinky at once.
What's the matter?
Asked Mollie, scared.
She's put a spell round the garden. We can't get out. She'll find us here in the morning.
It was as if there was an invisible wall all round the garden. The children couldn't get out anywhere.
Whatever shall we do?
Mollie asked Chinky, but he looked very gloomy.
We can't do anything. Peter was very silly to go and fall over like that, just when we had done everything so well.
Poor Peter said,
I'm very sorry. I do wish I hadn't. I didn't mean to.
Well, we'd better go and sit down in the porch.
said Chinky, who was shivering.
It's warmer there.
They were nodding off to sleep, for they were all very tired, when Whiskers suddenly began to snarl and spit. The children and Chinky woke up in a fright. They saw something flying round the garden like a big blackbird. Mollie stared, and then she leapt up and whispered as loudly as she dared,
It isn't a bird. It's our dear old wishing chair. It's come to find us.
Chinky gave a chuckle of delight. He ran to the chair and took hold of it, shouted to the others.
Come on, the only way out of this bewitched garden is by flying up and up. We can't get out any other way. The wishing chair is just what we want.
They all got into the chair. Whiskers was on Molly's knee. The chair flapped its wings, rose up into the air and flew almost to the clouds. Chinky giggled.
What will old Kiri Kiri say in the morning when she finds no one in her garden, not even Whiskers? She'll think she's been dreaming. I wish I could see her face.
The chair flew to the playroom. The children said good-night to Chinky, and with Whiskers in her arms, Molly ran with Peter up the path to their house. They were soon in bed and asleep. As for Whiskers, you may be sure she never went to sleep in the wishing chair again. The wishing chair is foolish. Once the wishing chair was very foolish and nearly landed the children and Chinky in a terrible mess. One morning, Chinky noticed the red wings flapping and jumped excitedly and shouted,
Come on, I'm longing for another adventure.
They all jumped onto the chair. It flew out of the door in a great hurry and then up into the air. It was a beautiful day, and children and Chinky could see for miles. The chair seemed in a rather silly mood. It swung to and fro as it flew, and even jiggled about once or twice. Chinky called out,
I say, I don't like this. Hold on tightly, children, in case the chair turns head over heels or something silly. It's in a dangerous mood.
Shall we go back home?
asked Molly in alarm. Pete shook his head.
Of course not. We'll never turn our backs on an adventure.
So on they went, the chair still doing its little tricks. At last Chinky really did get a bit frightened. For once Peter nearly fell off.
Go down to earth at once, chair.
He commanded. The chair seemed cross. It didn't want to go down, but it had to. So down it went, jiggling every now and again as if it really did mean to jerk the children off. Peter looked down to see where they were going. There was a village below them, and they seemed to be going down towards the roof of a house. Peter was worried.
Hope the chair doesn't land on the roof. It looks just as if it's going to.
But it did something even worse than land on the roof. It tried to go down the large red chimney belonging to the house. It really was behaving very foolishly. Of course, it couldn't possibly go down, and it stuck fast, 3 legs in and 1 out, and there it was, all sideways. Chinky climbed out first and helped Peter and Molly out too. They sat on the roof, holding on to the chimney, which felt rather hot because warm smoke was coming out of it. Chinky was very angry.
I never thought the chair would be so silly. It has acted so sensibly up to now. Now look what it's done. It's gone and stuck itself in somebody's chimney, and goodness knows how we're going to get it out. And here we are up on a roof in a village we don't know.
We'd better shout and see if someone will let us down,
said Peter. So they shouted.
Help! Help!
Soon a gnome heard their shouting and came out to see what it was all about. When he saw the 3 children up on the roof and the chair in the chimney, he was amazed. He shouted to his friends, and soon the whole village was staring upwards. Peter shouted to them,
Get a ladder and help us down. Please, our chair's landed us in a fix.
In a few minutes a long ladder was brought, and the children and Chinky climbed carefully down it to the ground. Chinky explained what had happened, and the village folk exclaimed in astonishment. Finally Peter said,
The thing is, how are we going to get the chair out? It can't stay there for the rest of its life. I don't see how we can possibly get it out.
But Chinky said,
Of course we can. We'll get the village sweep to come along and put his long brush up the chimney. Then the silly old chair will be swept out of the chimney. We will get into it when it comes down to earth and go home immediately before it has time to do anything silly again.
A round-faced gnome called out,
I'll fetch the sweep. He lives next door to me.
He ran off, and in a few minutes came back with a little sweep looking rather black, carrying his bundle of poles. He stared in astonishment at the chair in the chimney.
Can you push it out for us?
Asked Chinky anxiously. The sweep looked thoughtful.
I'll try.
He went into the house and fitted the big round brush on the first pole. He pushed it up the chimney. Then he fitted another pole onto the first one and pushed that up the chimney too. So he went on until the brush was almost at the top. Then he fitted on his last pole and started pushing and pushing, and the chair was getting loose as it was jerked further up. Suddenly it came right out of the chimney with a rush. The sweep's brush came out too and twiddled round in the air in a funny manner.
There it comes,
Shouted Molly.
Hi, chair, come down to earth.
But to the children's dismay, the naughty wishing chair flapped its red wings and flew right up into the air. It didn't go near the ground. They all watched it fly away till they could see it no longer. It was gone. After a while, Molly said,
Well, we'll have to get home some other way, that's all. I'm afraid we've lost the chair now.
Chinky looked at the bus timetable set out on a wall nearby, then said,
We'll catch the bus that leaves here in 5 minutes' time. It won't be long before we're home.
They got into the bus, which was very peculiar because the driver was a duck and the conductor a rabbit. However, Chinky didn't seem surprised, so Mollie and Peter said nothing but just stared. In 10 minutes they found themselves outside a cave in a hillside.
This is where we get off,
Said Chinky, much to their surprise. They followed him into the cave and up some steps. Chinky opened a door, and to the children's amazement they found themselves climbing out of a tree in the wood near to their home.
You simply never know where an entrance to fairyland is,
Said Molly, staring at the tree as Chinky shut the bark door. They ran home, and the very first thing they saw in their playroom was, yes, their wishing chair. They stared in astonishment. Then Peter said delightedly,
Why, it's come back home after all. Its wings have gone. Oh, good, it's come back to us. Isn't that lovely?
Molly ran in and sat down on it.
Good old chair. I'm glad you're back. I expect it's sorry now. I don't mind having nearly gone down a chimney now it's all over. It was a lot of fun, wasn't it?
But Chinky gave a little frown.
Don't say things like that in front of the chair. There's no knowing what it might do next.
Then Peter got a brush and said,
Let's brush our clothes clean. We'll get into trouble if we don't, and certainly no one would believe us if we said we'd been stuck in a chimney.
and Molly laughed.
That's true. Whatever shall we do next?
Aha! Wait and see. Mr. Twisty. One day, when the two children and Chinky were in their playroom at the bottom of the garden, reading quietly, a knock sounded at the door. They looked up. A small man stood there with a straw hat in his hand and a sly look on his face. He spoke in a funny voice.
Have you anything old to sell? I buy old clothes, carpets, furniture, anything you like. I'll give you a good price for it, too.
Molly replied politely.
No, thank you.
The man pointed to the wishing chair.
What about that old chair? I like the look of that. I'll give you a good price.
Certainly not. Now please go away,
Said Peter. The little man put on his straw hat, grinned at them all, and went. Chinky looked uncomfortable and said to the children,
I don't like the look of him. He may make trouble for us. I think I'll hop out into the garden today. I don't like people seeing me here.
In about 10 minutes, Mother came down the garden, followed by the little man in the straw hat. She told them that his name was Mr. Twisty, and he wanted to buy an old chair he'd seen there. And then, to the children's horror, she asked to see it. They had kept their wishing chair a secret, and now the secret was out. They really didn't know what to do. But before they could do anything, they heard Mr. Twisty saying in a sly voice,
That's agreed, then. £2 for that dirty old chair. I'll be back for it tonight.
And he bowed and went off up the garden path. Their mother noticed how upset the children were and told them she'd buy them a nice new comfy wicker chair to take its place. Mollie and Peter said nothing. Mollie burst into tears as soon as Mother had gone. She sobbed,
It's too bad. It's our own wishing chair, and that horrible Mr. Twisty is buying it for £2.
Chinky came in, and they told him what had happened. But he grinned at them and put his arm round Mollie, saying,
Don't cry, I've got a good plan.
What?
asked Mollie. Chinky told her.
I can get Mr. Nobbles the pixie carpenter, who lives in the field over there, to make me a chair almost exactly like the wishing chair. We'll let Mr. Twisty have that one, not ours. He won't know the difference. He doesn't know ours is a wishing chair. He thinks it is just an old and valuable chair. Well, he can buy one just like it, without the magic in it.
Mollie and Peter were pleased.
Can you really get one made in time?
I think so.
Said Chinky.
Come along with me and see.
So they squeezed under the hedge at the bottom of the garden and crossed the field beyond to where a big oak tree stood. Chinky pulled a root aside that stuck out above the ground, and under it was a trapdoor. Chinky rapped on it. It flew up, and a bald-headed pixie with enormous ears popped his head out. Chinky explained what he wanted, and the pixie invited them into his workshop. Mollie asked eagerly,
Do you think you could make us the chair in time?
Well,
said the pixie.
if I could get a quick spell, I would. A quick spell makes you work 3 times as fast as usual, you know. But they are so expensive.
Oh,
Said Mollie and Peter in dismay.
we've hardly any money.
No.
Then Chinky grinned at them in his wicked way.
Wait, remember that Mr. Twisty is paying £2 for the chair. Can you make the chair and buy the quick spell for £2, Mr. Nobbles?
Mr. Nobbles worked out a sum on a piece of paper and said he just could. He came back to the playroom with the children and saw their own chair. He nodded his head, saying,
Yes, I can make one. It is just the same as that.
Chinky said,
Now we'd better hide our own chair. Where shall we put it?
They decided to put it in the garden shed, where they covered it up with sacks. Just as they came back from the shed, they met Mr. Nobbles carrying on his back a new chair, just exactly like their old one. It was marvellous. Mr. Nobbles said,
The quick spell worked quickly. Here's the chair. You can bring me the money any time.
The children thanked him and put the chair in their playroom. Then they waited for Mr. Twisty. He turned up at 6:30, his straw hat in his hand, and the usual wide smile on his sly face.
There's the chair. Here's the money. Thank you very much.
He took the chair, paid over the money, and went off, whistling a tune. Chinky smiled broadly.
Well, he's got a marvellous pixie chair for his money, but he hasn't got a wishing chair.
And we've still got our dear magic chair.
Cried Peter, bringing it back from the shed. Just then, Mother popped her head in and saw the chair. She was glad it wasn't sold after all, as she rather liked the look of it. And then she told Peter to take it up to the house. Mother went away, and the children were dismayed. Chinky popped out of his hiding place and said,
That is bad news. You'll have to do as you're told, Peter. Take the chair to the house with you when you go tonight, and we'll try to think of some new way out of this problem. Oh dear, why can't we have our own chair?
So Peter took it up to the house with him, and Mother put it in the living room. Suppose it grew wings there? Whatever would happen? Two Bad Children. Peter and Molly thought very hard how to get their chair back, and at last Molly had an idea. She ran to the playroom to tell Peter and Chinky about it.
Listen, this is my idea. It's a very naughty one, and we shall get into trouble. But I don't see how we can help it. After all, it is our chair.
Go on, tell us your plan,
said Peter. Molly went on.
It's this. Let's spill things over the chair and tear the seat or something and scratch the legs. Then, when Mother sees how dirty, scratched and torn it is, she won't think it's good enough for the living room, and perhaps we can have it back again.
I say, that's a really good idea,
exclaimed Peter.
but we should get into trouble.
Molly said,
Well, even if we do get into trouble, it will be worth it if we can get our chair back again.
and Peter said,
I agree. What shall we do first? I know. We'll spill some ink across the seat. Come on.
He and Molly shouted goodbye to Chinky and ran up to the house. They went into the living room. The wishing chair stood there looking very good and proper. Peter got the ink bottle, and the two children emptied ink across the seat of the chair. Then they went to tell Mother. She was cross, very, very cross indeed. Not only did she scold them, but also stopped them from going out to tea that day. Molly and Peter said nothing. They were sorry about not going out to tea, but kept thinking they might get their wishing chair back, so they weren't too unhappy. The next day, Peter sat in the wishing chair and kicked his boots against the legs as hard as he could so that they were scratched and dented. Mother was angry, so angry that she sent Peter off to bed for the rest of the day. Poor Peter! He went very red, but he marched upstairs without a word. It was horrible to have to be so careless with a chair, especially one he loved so much, but still, somehow or other, he had to get it back to the playroom. I suppose it grew wings when Mother was sitting in it and it flew away with her. Whatever would she do? She'd be so frightened. Molly was sorry that he'd been sent to bed. She crept to his room, gave him a piece of chocolate to eat, and whispered,
I'm going to slip the seat now. I expect I'll be sent to bed too. But surely after that Mother will say it isn't good enough to be in the living room and we'll have it back again.
So Molly went downstairs, got out her scissors and began to cut out some doll's clothes, and then she ran her scissors into the seat of the chair and made a big cut there. Mother came in after a while, stared at it in horror. She was just as cross as she had been with Peter. She said she was ashamed of both of them and sent Molly packing off to bed too. Then she said that the chair was so badly damaged that it would have to go back to the playroom. Molly cried when she got into bed. It was dreadful to have Mother so cross, but she felt better now she knew that the wishing chair was really going back to the playroom. She and Peter had to stay in their room all day, and they were very tired of it. But when the next day came, they carried the chair back to their playroom, opened the door, and called Chinky.
We've got the chair, Chinky,
Peter told him. Molly added,
Jolly good, but we did get into trouble, Chinky. We both went to our room for the day, and Mother was ever so cross. We shall have to be extra nice to her now to make up, because we didn't really mean to annoy her.
Good for you.
said Chinky, pleased. Then he looked at the chair and grinned, saying,
My word, you did do some damage to it, didn't you? What a mess it's in, Molly. You'd better get a needle and cotton and mend the seat, and Peter and I better polish up the legs a bit and try to hide the scratches.
So that morning the children and Chinky worked hard at the chair, and by dinner time it really looked very much better. Molly put back onto it the cushion they always had there and said,
Dear old wishing chair, it's so nice to have you again. Mr. Twisty nearly got you, and Mother nearly had you too. But now we've got you back again at last.
Peter looked at the chair and said,
and I'm longing for another adventure. I wish it would grow wings again.
Chinky just smiled quietly and said,
I expect it wants another adventure as much as we do. It will grow its wings again soon. It will.